Okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through our study guide a little bit differently than what we've done in the past. I'm going to really go through each and every question. You'll have a study guide paper that you'll be able to write these answers down with. So you can look for that. Get that paper out now if you don't have it out, so you'll have it ready to answer, write in the answers for these questions and prepare for your test, which will be on 5.3 and 5.5. More than likely, we will do this test in the coming few days. I'll let you know when. But I'm going to go ahead and run through these questions with the answers for you. So please pay attention, jot these things down as we go through these questions. Let's start with number one. It says, what was the open door policy? The open door policy was pretty much a trade agreement where the United States was trying to open trade with China. It was an economic policy more so than anything for the United States. Number two says explain sphere influence and where was the United States trying to gain a sphere. The United States was trying to gain a sphere in China. And the sphere of influence, again, deals with economics. The United States wanted to have an area of China or most of China that they could actually trade with. A lot of the imperialist countries like Great Britain and Germany and France and Russia and Japan and those countries already had interest in China. The United States pretty much wanted to create an influence in China as well. So sphere of influence directly relates to that. Number three, it says by issuing the Roosevelt Corollary, what was Roosevelt trampling on for these Latin American countries? Of course, the Roosevelt Corollary said that the United States had a reason to intervene in Latin America. And Roosevelt is pretty much trampling on the idea that these countries were free and independent. He was violating their sovereignty, is the big word. So if he's violating their sovereignty, he's pretty much violating their independence as an independent country if the United States goes into those countries. Number four says, how did the United States end up acquiring land in Panama for the canal? Remember that the United States wanted the land in Panama. They encouraged a bloodless revolution in Panama in order to gain the land. Panama was going to rebel or revolt against the country of Colombia, and the United States would back that revolt in order to get the land that they needed to build the canal. Number five, what president created dollar diplomacy? Dollar diplomacy, remember, was created by William Howard Taft. Number six, it says, what was the goal of dollar diplomacy? It was to send money into countries to protect U.S. investments in those countries by sending in dollars rather than having to send in the military. Number seven, it says the use of big stick diplomacy was mainly done to accomplish this in Latin America. Again, it was mainly done to accomplish building the Panama Canal and to protect U.S. interest in Latin America. Number eight, what was the Roosevelt Corollary, which we said, it just basically said that the United States had the right to intervene in Latin America. It's sort of a piggyback on top of the Monroe Doctrine. Number nine, what was the impact of moral dollar and big stick diplomacy on Latin America? And again, this means that that all of these things, even though some of them were, I won't say very successful, some of them did have their pros and cons. But for the most part, the United States would eventually have to intervene in these Latin American countries. So the impact was that the United States would eventually have to intervene in Latin America, meaning they would send in troops. Let's look at number 10, describe sphere of influence. We just said this a minute ago too. Sphere of influence is when you have or open up an area of trade within a country to, benefit you economically. Look at number 11. What was the United States hoping to secure through the open door policy? They were hoping to secure more trade with China. Number 12, how did the United States help put an end to the Boxer Rebellion? Remember, the Boxer Rebellion was a rebellion against foreigners in China. They thought that these foreigners were trying to destroy their culture. And so they rebelled against those foreign countries that were there, and the United States would respond by eventually sending in the military. Number 13, what was the Boxer Rebellion? I just answered. Remember, this was when Chinese nationalists rebelled against foreigners in China who they thought were trying to destroy their culture. Number 14, what was meant by speak softly and carry a big stick in Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy? Pretty much he's saying we'll negotiate, but if you don't negotiate, then we will bring in the military. And that's what speak softly and carry a big stick was mainly about. 15, explain the difference between the Roosevelt Corollary and the Monroe Doctrine. Remember, the Roosevelt Corollary said the United States had the right to intervene in Latin America if need be. The Monroe Doctrine said that Latin America was closed to colonization. Those are the main two differences between those two agreements. 16, what was the Platt Amendment? We discussed this in the last few lessons. The Platt Amendment dealt with Cuba. It would allow the United States to have naval bases in Cuba, as well as allowing the United States to intervene in Cuba if they needed to. 17, what did Wilson hope to accomplish through moral diplomacy? He was hoping to spread the idea of democracy to those countries. Remember, moral diplomacy was the idea of giving money to countries that were similar to us. So he was hoping to spread democracy by using moral diplomacy. 18, why did the U.S. Senate refuse to ratify the Treaty of Versailles? The U.S. Senate felt like if they approved the Treaty of Versailles, that the United States would become involved in foreign conflicts, which they just got through with World War I. They didn't want to get involved in it again. So they were afraid we would get in foreign conflicts or foreign affairs, and the United States was just wanting to get away from that. 19, explain big stick diplomacy. Again, speak softly, carry a big stick. That Theodore Roosevelt was willing to negotiate, but if the negotiations didn't go the way the United States wanted, then that meant that the United States would bring in the military. Number 20, list the causes of World War I. And remember that's an acronym: MANIA, militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism, and assassination. Those are the 5 that you need to know. Let's look at 21. What was meant by Warren G. Harding's slogan, a return to normalcy? Harding becomes the president after Woodrow Wilson, and he immediately wants to return the United States back to the way they were before the war, which is really going back to isolationism. 22. What was part of the peace plan drafted by Wilson at the end of World War I? Of course, his part was the 14 points. And remember, in the 14 points, he was asking pretty much to do away with a lot of those causes. No buildup of the military, no secret alliances, allow countries to be free and independent, form a League of Nations to settle disputes before these disputes would lead us into another world war. So those were some of the things that were mentioned in his 14 points to try to negotiate peace at the end of World War I. 23, Wilson's main goal at the end of World War I was creating what? It was creating a lasting peace. 24, describe what militarism is. Militarism is the buildup of a nation's military. 25, describe what alliances are. And alliances are when you have other countries that join together for the same cause to help each other out. 26, describe what imperialism is. It's when one country exerts its power and control over another country. 27, define nationalism. It's pride in one's country. 28, what was the purpose of the Great White Fleet? The Great White Fleet was a huge navy that was built by the United States during this period. The Great White Fleet was sent around the world to show naval dominance by the United States to all the other countries of the world. So it's to show our naval superiority. 29, the sinking of this British ship, where over 100 Americans were killed, was one of the causes of World War I. It was the sinking of the Lusitania. Number 30, how did the Zimmerman telegram play a role in drawing the United States into World War I? Remember, the Zimmerman telegram encouraged the country of Mexico to attack the United States. In return, Germany would grant land to the United States, or Germany would grant land to Mexico in return for them attacking the U.S. Number 31, explain the Espionage and Sedition Act. It pretty much said that you weren't allowed to criticize the government, criticize the war effort. You can't criticize buying bonds. All those things would have been against the Espionage and Sedition Act. This was done during World War I. 32, what did President Wilson try to do to get the Treaty of Versailles ratified by the Senate? He actually went on a tour of the entire United States. He went to encourage the people to actually help him get these senators to vote in favor of the Treaty of Versailles. 33, what was the basis of Wilson's 14 points? Once again, there were a few main things that you need to know. He wanted to do away with the secret alliances. He wanted to give countries self-determination, meaning they can pick their own form of government. He wanted to make sure that there was a League of Nations where there would be this organization that would settle disputes before it led to war. Again, no more secret alliances. Those were all part of those 14 points. 34, how did participation in World War I impact the United States? It returned the United States back to isolationism.